Hey there, and welcome to the Jamie Davis podcast. Glad that you're joining me for this very first episode. The premise is very, very simple. I'm going to sit down with people that encourage, inspire, and challenge me because I think that there's a good chance that they will encourage, inspire, and challenge you. And that is definitely the case for our first guest, I guess that you will call it. It's a friend of mine for many years, Isaac Moreno. He is a sound engineer, but he is more than that. He's a sound engineer. He is he's an encourager. He is a preacher, whether he realizes it or not. And he has something to say, and I think that it's about time for him to start saying it. So I'm very happy to introduce him to you. I've toured with him over the years in different bands that I've played with, and he is a very valuable part of the No Turning Back creatives. He is one of those guys that is generally the smartest guy in every room that he walks into. He says he's a nerd, but I say he's a genius. And I think his story and testimony will really inspire you and motivate you to keep going. So without further ado, here is Isaac Moreno.
Born and raised in SoCal, born to a Hispanic family, and always worked in some type of form of music. Dad always had a recording studio inside the house. So basically I say I grew up in a recording studio. Yeah. So always kind of had that kind of background. Dad was an evangelist, would go around and preach every Friday, Saturday.
Really?
Huh?
Your dad was an evangelist? Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from the time I was 3 years old until I was about 19. We would go down to Mexico and minister in Mexico every weekend. And so, that was my life growing up. And there's even a funny story about one time when I was about 16 years old. Dad would leave me in Mexico to kind of help teach and train some of the guys on some of the gear that they would buy, recording gear. And since I grew up with all this stuff, Dad would be like, hey, I'll leave my son. He'll teach you how to use the stuff. And the guys were supposed to get me back across the border to get to school. And when we got to the border, everybody turned in their green cards and said, and I looked at them and I said, American citizen, which is all you were supposed to do. Yeah. And they would let you cross the border. And they said, sure you are. And I said, no, really, I'm an American citizen. I'm on my way to school. And this is the school I go to. And the guy goes, I don't believe you because everybody else in here gave me their green cards and all that kind of stuff. And you're telling me you're an American citizen. And they had to actually call the school to verify that I actually was enrolled. Yes. So it was really funny, but I was kind of stressed out.
Funny at the time.
I was really, I was scared, more likely, oh my gosh, am I going to make it to school? Dad's going to get mad. So, kind of grew up doing a lot of that stuff with Dad and ministering. And then, fast forward, many years later, I ended up getting the call to work with Super Chick.
Yeah.
At the time, and that's where I met you, and I met Pete and Rich, and
what year was that? Now I'm trying to think.
Oh my gosh, bro, wasn't it like late 90s?
No, it was 2000s. Because I didn't.
Was it 2000s?
I came to Nashville in 2002. Is when I really.
You're right. Okay, so then part of the story then.
2005 was the first tour I did with KJ, and I think I was with KJ when I met you.
Yeah, you were. So I know where I skipped.
6 or 7, something like that.
I skipped. So from California, I ended up going to, where did I go?
Was it Kansas first?
Oh, Kansas City. Yeah. Kansas City. I moved to Kansas City and to work for a music ministry / they used to host conferences and tours, and we would tour with people like Grits, a bunch of NFL players that were Christians, and we would set up these conferences and these concerts, and we would go into the schools and do like a small little thing, and then we would do these huge events afterwards. So living here in Kansas City, worked for a recording studio, all that kind of stuff. And I kind of grew into this direction of wanting to be more of a studio musician or studio engineer.
Yeah.
And the story goes, God had kind of prompted my heart that I would be moving back to California. And in my mind, I was like, I'll never move back to California. I love living here in Kansas. I love the people. I love the work. I feel like I have way more work here than I ever did in California. And so I went to my boss, who was a Christian, and I kind of shared with him, like, hey, man, I had this really weird dream. I felt like God was telling me I'm going to be moving back to California. And he looks at me and he goes, you know what? He goes, it's kind of funny. I had the same kind of dream that you were going to come talk to me about you moving to California. I was like, all right, well, that doesn't make sense. Okay. So I kind of shoved it off and I didn't tell anybody else about that. And another buddy of mine calls me up out of the blue and just kind of goes, hey, man, let's grab some lunch. And I'm like, yeah, cool. So I remember we were at a Chipotle, and I'm saying that the white way because it should be Chipotle, but it's, but I mean, he walks into the doors and he looks at me and he goes, hey, bro, I got a question for you. When are you moving to California? And I was like, why would you even ask me that question? He goes, man, I don't know. He goes, I felt like God wanted me to ask you when you're moving. Wow. And so obviously it was major confirmation. So I told the guy, I said, listen, I'll move to California if I work for Disney. If I can get a job at Disney working in the recording studio, man, I'll move in a heartbeat. And so I told God, I'll move if I get the job at Disney. So probably weeks pass by. I see that Disney is hiring engineers at the recording studio. And I'm going, okay, God, don't mess with me. So I said, I'm going to fill out an application, fill out the resume, submit my resume, all that kind of stuff. And I think, there were probably thousands of people that submitted for it. And I remember going through the interview process, and I mean, they probably spoke to me 3 or 4 times. And by the end of it, it was one of those things that the human resource lady says, okay, it's between you and one other guy. Wow. You've made it to the top 2. And so I got super excited. The lady was like, if I were you, I would start moving out this way, pack up your things, come out this way because the guy really liked you. And I was like, okay, great. So I put in my 2 weeks notice, all that kind of stuff. We pack up the house, we get ready to move. And my last day at the recording studio, I get the phone call from Disney and they say, we're so sorry. We've had to pass on you. No. We feel that you have way too much musical experience and you would be really bored doing voiceover work for cartoons and video games. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Who would be bored doing that kind of stuff for your company? And they just said, yeah, but you just have so much musical background that we just really don't, we would hate to put you in a position where you didn't enjoy your work. So completely defeated. We ended up moving back to California, and I call that season of my life kind of the desert season. It felt like nothing was going right. I felt so alone. I felt so abandoned and like, why God? And I don't say that God dangled a carrot in front of me to get me to go, but it was just one of those things that's like, God, I will only do it if you do this for me. Wow. And so I was trying to negotiate with God in a sense, and that's not how God works. Right. So, but it was my desert season. So literally I felt like everything was stripped away from me. I mean, I ended up working for grocery stores and window manufacturers and stuff. I mean, I was farthest thing from music, but I believe that time was there for me so that I could focus on who God was in my life and what he could provide and the things that he could do. Moving back to California, obviously, living in California is extremely expensive to try to find a house. Yeah. I mean, it's like, if you don't have a great job, good luck. Yeah. And so we were living with my parents and we were living with Tiffany's parents at the time, and, trying just to get our feet on the ground. And eventually we go to my mother-in-law's church at the time. And small church, it was just a small little church. And they're like, hey, we need help with sound. And so I started helping them with sound. And then I ended up getting hired for one of the California casinos out there to work audio production and stuff. And all this time, obviously the time at the casino wasn't the blessing. I mean, yes, it provided an income, but being in a casino,
Right.
a completely different environment.
Yeah.
But working at the church, I was under leadership. I was under really, in my mind, really great leadership. It taught me a lot of things about myself and how to be a leader and how to oversee a ministry, how to not only oversee a ministry, but how to help people grow healthy and serving in the ministry. And I ended up taking over the youth band, and I started developing worship teams out of the bands, out of the youth, to where I was developing them and they were making it to the adult ministry, being able to serve in, regular church, big church. Yeah. And so it was like, I saw myself growing in this way of leadership, and I had almost gotten to the point where I was going to become an ordained minister.
Wow.
And what happened was, so let me back up a little bit. That's when I got the phone call to go work for Super Chick, when I had just started doing that.
Yeah.
And that's when I
was
had
on
met
that
you.
tour, and it's interesting. Little side note for people there. There was hopefully he's not watching this. There was a guy that was working as, I think he was our monitor guy.
He was your monitor, and he was the tech guy for Super Chick, guitar tech.
So this is just like behind the scenes of the music industry. Well, he got let go of, like dropped off at an airport, like, you're going home, like, here's a ticket, you're going home. And then you got hired. So we went to bed one night on the bus, woke up, and the guy was gone, and you were there on the couch in the front line. So that's how Isaac Moreno entered all of our lives. Like, part of us guys in No Turning Back Music, all of us, like, that's how we met. Isaac appeared, curled up, sleep on a front lounge couch on a tour bus. And that was
man, God opened that door, because I seriously thought that, not that working for a church is like, oh, you've given up all your dreams, all your hopes, all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm saying. But I just kind of was like, I always felt when I was young that God was going to show me the world, that I was going to be able to see, most of the United States and stuff like that. And
before we get into that, like, I just want to stop there for a second, because I think this is important for people to realize, because a lot of them might be in a season where they feel like they're where you were at, where I feel like my talents aren't getting used, and I feel like it's like out of the element that I want to be in. But God sees all, and he uses it all. And so the thing is, you have to be ready. Like, I mean, what happens if you get that call and you're not ready? Your skills aren't ready when you got that call. You could just be busy being mad, but you were somewhere serving. You were somewhere developing your skills as a leader and as a engineer. Obviously, you're still constantly learning. And then when that opportunity came, you were ready, and you walked in, and the rest is history. So that, I think that's an encouragement to people when they're in those seasons. And obviously, there's a lot of people, probably more people than usual, that are in that season right now, where because of the pandemic, you're not working, you're not doing what, you're just scraping by, trying to figure out what to do with life, and it's not your passion. But God has a way of using all of those little things that you acquire in whatever season you're in for the next season. And I just think that's
wholeheartedly. I mean, because if it wasn't working for the church, if I was doing a job somewhere else, those lessons of either work ethic or the importance of customer service, I mean, interacting with people, being able to hear people out, and that kind of stuff, all those other jobs that I took before actually working in the church, I mean, they all applied to me. All that stuff was applied and applicable to, what ends up happening when you're out on tour. Every day we were meeting a whole new group of people, right? And I was the first one off the bus and the last one on, but I would be the face, the first, even your wife, when she was helping me, but we were the first faces that people would see.
Yeah.
So we would always have to come out happy, joyous, no matter what happened the night before.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the stuff that you learn. It's like, and not that we were faking it,
Right.
but it's like we were genuinely happy to see a new group of people that were ready to minister, or ready to create an event, an atmosphere for people to be saved, or for people to give their lives, or people to give up on alcoholism, or I mean, we saw it night after night, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
people, putting drugs at the altar, whatever it was, during that ministry that we served together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, I mean, don't look at where you're at right now, because God has something coming
Right.
on its way.
Yeah.
And you just got to take the lessons that you're learning now and get ready to apply them for later. You'll see it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things that I go, where did I ever learn that? And I have to think back, oh yeah, I did this. And that's why it applies, or that's why it comes so easy, or that's why it comes so natural, because I worked at it.
Yeah.
So, where were we? We were.
So you get to the gig with Super Chick. That's what.
So I get to the gig with Super Chick, and I mean, obviously, just a great time. I learned a lot there. After Super Chick, I come back home. I work for a church now, and the ministry of that church had started to explode. By that time, I think I had 4 full-fledged youth worship teams that would rotate. And we're talking drummers, keyboard players, guitar players, singers, all that. I mean, I had 4 bands that I was rotating in and out of worship. And so seeing that ministry grow from, I think the church at the time when we were there, when we first started, was something like 200. And by the time I left, I think we were a church of 2,500.
Really? Wow.
So to see a church start so small and then just kind of explode and boom.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like I said, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
But my time came up when, and this is when I was almost going to be getting ready to become an ordained minister. They were going to ordain me, but that's when the whole economic thing took a dive.
Yeah.
And giving went out the door, and I was basically furloughed. And at that time, I was doing video production, audio production, and lighting for the whole church. I was taking care of all the tech stuff. And I started to have dreams. Dreams started coming to me again. And what it was the band Seventh Day Slumber. And they were saying, pray for us. At the end of every dream that I had of them, it was pray for us, pray for us. Out of the blue, I shoot Joseph a text. And I was like, hey, bro, Joseph and Jeremy a text or an email. I was like, hey, man, I don't know what's going on, but just want to let you guys know that a brother's praying. If you guys ever need anything, let me know. Next day, I get a phone call. Hey, man, we need you out in Montana. I'm like, what? They're like, we need you in Montana. We need a sound guy. We got this festival going on. We don't have a sound guy. We're going to fly you out to Montana. So I fly out to Montana. And at that point, I full-time on the road. My whole life just changed again. So then we make a decision to move to Nashville. And while I'm there in Nashville, I say I visited Nashville. I really didn't live there. We were out on the road so much.
Right, exactly.
I mean, right? I mean, like, you'd come home, you'd be like, man, this food in the fridge has been in there for 3 months. You're like, it's all bad now. Yeah, exactly. But you start learning to buy food like weeks at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
But, we go through that whole where, you and I get to serve in ministry together with Seventh Day Slumber. And again, I mean, just traveled everywhere. I mean, and like I said earlier, I felt like God was going to show me the world. And that was one of the things that, I felt called, that I felt God was telling me. And sure enough, man, I mean, we went to probably, 48 states, Canada and Germany.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
The only 2 states I'm missing is Hawaii and Alaska. So if there's any churches out there in Hawaii or Alaska that need me to come out and help, shoot me a message.
That's awesome.
But, we went through that whole time. and did some amazing ministry and got to work with a lot of great people. And you got to sing with Striper.
Oh,
And,
God. Oh, my Lord. That's one of those things that is buried in my past that I don't bring out very much, but that was definitely a highlight. What had happened was we did a show somewhere. I don't remember where it was.
It was some festival.
But Striper was there, and like for me and Joseph and Jeremy in particular, we were just psycho fans, like as our childhood, like just blaring all their music. And so we were like borderline stalkers, like waiting for them to actually get to the venue. And when they got there, they like committed the cardinal sin of talking to somebody while they're in the bathroom. So, hey man, I love your work. You're like, awkward, dude. I'm using the bathroom, you know. But anyway, we were so excited. And so at the end of their set, they do To Hell with the Devil as like the encore. And then they tried to get John from Skillet, John Cooper, to come out and sing with them. He wanted no part of it. So he was like, oh, no. And so me and Joseph were like, hey man, we know that song. And so they pulled us out there and they start into the beginning of To Hell with the Devil. And then me and Joseph are looking back and forth, like which one of us is going to start. And then it starts, and then I don't know where it came from, man, but I just felt it out. This big black dude up there screaming. That was a highlight, man, for
sure. See, I mean, we had some amazing experiences. Yeah, I mean, what can you say? Then, you know, my season ended with Seventh Day Slumber, and I remember that day. Mm-hmm. That day was I was in New Braunfels, Texas, and I was helping a church with a sound system install. Mm-hmm. And I had woken up one morning, and I literally, like, audibly almost heard God's voice say, your season is done. You can go home. Wow. And all I did was just weep, not because I was sad that my season was over, but like this peace just fell over me.
Yeah.
And it was just this love and just this grace. It just was like, I felt like, well done. You served well, you served hard. Mm-hmm. Your family sacrificed, you sacrificed financially, time together, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's time for you to go home. Mm-hmm. And it was at the perfect time because, you know, my son was going to be ready to turn 18. And, you know, my little girl was, you know, missing me like crazy. And it was like, you know what, it's time for me to be a dad.
Yeah.
And we had no idea where we were going to go. I mean, obviously your first thought is, well, let's just move back to where our family's at, you know, go back to California. Yeah, we're going to struggle. Yeah, I probably won't be able to work in what I love to do, but you know, whatever. We'll just suck it up and just kind of go with it.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if you remember Patrick Turley or not.
Yes, drummer.
So we were in California for Thanksgiving. So it was all happened around this Thanksgiving time. And we were in California with our families and we were doing Thanksgiving. I get a phone call from Patrick Turley and he goes, hey bro, he goes, I don't know what you guys have planned. Because I don't know what's going on in your lives. He goes, but I felt like God telling me to let you use my apartment until you figure it out. Wow. And we were still living in Nashville. We were just in California for the holidays. But so he had an apartment in Nashville. He said, listen, he goes, I'm supposed to pay for the rent. He goes, if you can just cover the utilities, he goes, I'll cover the rent for the house, for the apartment. Wow. And you guys can stay there. And until you figure out or until God shows you what you need to be doing. And literally, we didn't call anybody and tell anybody like we were moving or anything like that. I mean, it was one of those God moments where this guy just calls out of the blue and just says, God told me.
Wow.
So we end up staying in his apartment. And I know this seems like this huge, long story, but we stayed at his apartment. And then God uses a man out of here in Kansas City that I had worked with a while back, calls me out of the blue and says, hey, Isaac, I'm getting ready to launch my ministry. I don't know how to do video. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. can you fly out here and help me establish my ministry in that aspect? And at the time, financially, we didn't have really any money. I mean, we were barely scraping by.
Yeah.
And I had just enough money for a one-way ticket to Kansas City.
Mm.
And he promised that he would pay me, if I would help him set up his ministry and do all this stuff for him. And so I get out here, and the owner of the recording studio that I worked for found out that I was in Kansas City. So he calls me up and he goes, "Hey, I heard you're in Kansas City." And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm getting ready to go on vacation." He goes, "Would you come run my business for me while I'm away?" Now, he had downsized quite a bit. We had this huge facility, 3 studios in the building. And so he completely downsized it and brought it all back into his house. And he goes, "A lot of the clients that we have," he goes, "I still have them." He goes, they'll know you, they'll trust you, all that kind of stuff. And so great. So I'm staying at his house now. I'm running his business for him. When he gets done with his vacation, he comes back and he goes, "You know what?" He goes, "Have you ever thought about moving back to Kansas City?" I was like, I mean, we're literally in the middle of transition. We have no idea where we're going to go. And he goes, "Tell you what, if you move to Kansas City," he goes, "I'm getting ready to kind of semi-retire." He goes, "But I'll let you run the business. I'll pay you a salary." He goes, "But that's only if you come to Kansas City." And so we prayed about it. He gave me enough money to fly back home. And so Tiffany and I were talking about it, like, what do we do? What do we do? And we sat down with our kids, and all of our kids, I say all, I only have 2 kids, make it sound like I have this huge family. But our kids said, "You know what? We wouldn't mind going back to Kansas City." So we picked up and moved to Kansas City. And when we got here, not only did he give me a salary, not only did he give me a business to run, or give me a business, or allowed me to run his business, but he also gave me his house, in a sense. So he left for an entire year.
Wow.
And left my wife and I and our kids in his house. So again, showing God's provision throughout all this, because we had no idea what we were going to do.
Yeah.
And before they got ready to leave, before we, the whole thing was all set up and things like that, they were getting ready to leave. We were living there at the house with them. We get this phone call from a voice actor that lives here in Kansas City, and his name is Tom Kane. Now, for most of you nerds, you probably know who Tom Kane is. If you're not a nerd, I'll tell you who Tom Kane is. Tom Kane is a voice actor who's done voice. His voice has been like on McDonald's commercials, Walmart commercials, the Oscar Awards. He's one of the announcers for the Oscar Awards. A really big guy, in the voiceover world. Matter of fact, if you've ever watched Disney movies, remember where it says "Stay tuned" for after the featured, that was Tom Kane.
Wow.
So a lot of us grew up hearing his voice, and when I finally heard his voice, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I know your voice." He goes, "Yeah, from the Disney movies," and I was like, "Yep, wow." From all the Disney movies. Yeah. So he had called and basically said that he had this project that he needed some help with, and we were like, "Okay, what is it?" And the owner of the studio at the time kind of was like, he was doing most of the dealings, and the guy said, "Well, we're doing ADR work where we're recording voices right back to video." And we're like, "Great, yeah." He goes, "But I don't know how to do that." And like I said earlier, I had worked video and audio. So I was like, "I know how to do it." And if I didn't know how to do it, I was going to figure it out.
Right. Yeah.
Believe me, I was going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so we get the script. And once we get the script for the program of what we're supposed to do, I find out it's Lego Star Wars.
Wow.
So he is the voice of Yoda for Clone Wars, the Lego Star Wars, anything along that line. He's that voice. He's that guy. And so we do, we did maybe 8 episodes or something like that with them. But through that relationship, once we had established this relationship, throughout the years and stuff like that, he eventually brings me back a project, and he goes, "Hey, Isaac," he goes, "my studio's down at home." He goes, I need you to do this project for me." I said, "Great. What is it?" And it's recording his voice for Walt Disney World's tram for Christmas time, because they normally change the message for each of their seasons and stuff. So this was there for Christmas.
Yeah.
So I tell you this huge long story because something that I wanted to do, which was, I told God, I want to work for Disney.
Mm.
And it didn't happen. But through the years of my faithfulness and his faithfulness, but me willing to stick it out and work hard and take everything that was ever given to me, God put me in a position where I ended up working for Disney again. Now, Disney owns Star Wars, Disney owns Marvel, Disney owns Fox, and I've worked with all those companies.
Wow.
And so now I've worked, for this company, and I'm going, oh my gosh, God brought me all the way around.
Yeah.
Back here again. I'm in Kansas City again, the place where I left.
Right. To go there.
To go work for Disney. And now I'm back here in Kansas City.
Disney came to you.
And Disney came to me. Right. And I had met the, through relationships with Tom and stuff like that, I had met the guy who actually voices the new Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, he goes, I was telling him my story, and he was like, you're lucky you didn't take the job. And I said, why? And he says, well, they actually closed that studio in Buena Vista 3 years later.
Wow.
So I would have gone out to California, worked for Disney, and they would have shut the studio on me. I would have been without a job, probably would have felt like I was without purpose.
Yeah.
And would have never learned all the lessons that I needed to learn to get me to this point where I am now, where now I've worked with Disney, I've worked with Marvel, I've worked with Warner Brothers, I've worked with Lucasfilm, I've worked with DreamWorks. I mean, God has opened all those doors because I was willing to walk through everything that I went through,
Yeah. And now you own the studio that you.
Yeah. So this year, 2021, the owner of the studio basically said, I'm getting ready to completely retire. Here are all the clients. They all belong to you. And, wished me well. And, it's there for as a mentor and, for me to ask him questions and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a new era for me. And
I love it. I mean, obviously we've talked about it. I know that there's challenges with being the owner where, it's all starts with you and the generation of funds and all that falls on you. But I just believe that God brought you to this season because now you've served well with all the different people that you served. But in the Bible, it says, who will give a man that of his own if he's not faithful with that of another man's? And I believe that because you've served and because you've been faithful, not just worked, but served and been faithful, that now God is giving you your own. And even though it might be scary and a little bit like, oh gosh, how's this going to work? I believe that God has more for you in this season with your own than anything that you've done in the past. I believe that financially you're going to come into a season that you have more than you've ever had. You'll be, because God can trust you that you are a conduit, that what he gives you, you're going to be free to disperse and give to other people. And so I just encourage you. It's an amazing story to hear that whole story and how God brought it all back around and then brought you back to Disney and gave you the desire of your heart. But I believe this new season as Isaac, the owner, the business owner, I know that in watching you over the years that God gave you your own house, like you have your own house and now you have your own thing and it's your family's future and legacy. And now you're building something that's your own. And I'm just so excited and happy and proud for you. And